So, you're thinking about buying a home in Houston. Awesome. You're probably already thinking about things like hurricanes, right? But what if I told you the biggest threats aren't the high winds you see on the news? What if they're actually two silent killers that can absolutely wreck a home's value? Well, in this explainer, we are going to break down the two biggest risks that every single Houston home buyer needs to understand. You've heard this a million times, right? Maybe from a friend, your family, maybe even a real estate agent. Oh, I don't need flood insurance. I'm not in a flood zone. It sounds totally logical. It sounds safe. But as we're about to see, that thinking is a massive, massive gamble. And look, I'm not being dramatic when I say that. Believing this one simple sentence has literally cost Houston homeowners billions of dollars. This is the big myth we're here to bust today, because getting why this is so wrong, well, that's the key to protecting your investment. So what are these so-called silent killers? Well, they're not what you typically see on TV during a big storm. We're talking about the two things that basically define Houston's entire landscape: the water and the very soil your house is built on. That's right. The real dangers aren't the howling winds. Nope. It's the flooding from places the official maps totally miss, and it's the slow, constant movement of Houston's unique soil that can just quietly crack a home's foundation. So let's dive into each one. All right, first up, water. Everybody talks about flood zones, but the truth is, the real flood risk in Houston goes way, way beyond those simple lines on a map. Let's take a look at what those zones actually mean, and maybe more importantly, what they totally leave out. Okay, so FEMA basically gives us two main flavors. You've got Zone A-E, that's the 100-year floodplain. If you buy a house here and you have a mortgage, your bank is going to force you to get flood insurance. No choice. Then there's Zone X. This is the so-called low-risk area where insurance is totally optional. And folks, this is where the danger really is. Now, check this out. During Hurricane Harvey, a storm that changed everything, a staggering 50 to 60% of all the homes that flooded were in the safe Zone X. Just let that sink in for a second. More than half the victims were in an area where they were told they didn't really need to worry. So why? Why does this happen? Well, it comes down to a concept called sheet flow. See, the official FEMA maps, they're pretty good at tracking rivers and bayous when they rise, but they completely miss what happens when it rains so hard and so fast that the storm sewers just can't keep up. The streets themselves turn into temporary rivers, and that water flows right into people's living rooms. So here's the simple, non-negotiable rule for buying a home in Houston. Unless you live several stories up in a high-rise building, you need flood insurance. Period. The good news? In Zone X, it's often incredibly cheap. We're talking sometimes just a few dollars a day. Seriously, think of it as the best sleep insurance you will ever buy. But wait, there's more. There's another hidden water risk, and it's called the flood pool. Think of the huge reservoirs, like Addicks and Barker, as giant bathtubs. Now, the flood pool is all the land right outside the rim of that bathtub. Most of the time, it's totally dry. It's full of parks and neighborhoods, but in a massive storm, that tub can overflow and all that water backs up right into those homes. So how do you check for something like this? Well, your first line of defense is a document called the seller's disclosure. In Texas, sellers are legally required to tell you about a property's history. Just look straight at Section 4. It asks them point blank if the home has ever flooded or if it sits inside one of these flood pools. Okay, let's shift gears. We've talked about water. Now let's move to our second silent killer, the soil. Houston is built on a type of expansive clay that locals call gumbo, and its constant movement is kind of like an earthquake happening in slow motion, 24/7, right underneath your house. So here's the deal. When this gumbo soil gets wet, it swells up just like a sponge. But then, when our hot Texas sun bakes it dry, it shrinks and it cracks, pulling away from the foundation. This never-ending cycle of expanding and contracting puts an incredible amount of stress on a home's concrete slab. And this leads to one of the absolute strangest things about owning a home in Houston. You literally have to water your foundation. I know, it sounds crazy, but the whole point is to keep the moisture in the soil around your house as consistent as possible, especially during those long, dry summers. It stops the ground from shrinking away and letting the corners of your house start to sag. Now, the good news is you do not need to be an expert to spot potential trouble. When you're looking at a house, just walk outside and check the brick corners. Do you see any of those stair-step cracks running through the mortar? Then, look up where the brick meets the trim of the roof. If you see a big gap there, that's a huge red flag that a part of the foundation has dropped. Inside, the clues are just as obvious once you know what to look for. Try closing a few of the interior doors. Is the gap at the top all uneven? Does a door swing open or closed all by itself? And keep an eye out for those classic diagonal cracks that come out from the corners of door frames and windows. These are all signs that the house is shifting.
Now, seeing these signs might make you want to just run for the hills. But don't panic. Seriously. Finding foundation issues isn't always a deal breaker. Really, it's just the beginning of a negotiation. Let me walk you through the strategy.
The absolute most important thing to remember is that this is a fixable problem. Foundation repair is incredibly common in Houston. Everybody deals with it. It's a known issue with very established solutions, which means it's manageable, and, maybe most importantly, it's a powerful point for negotiation. Now here's a little twist for you. Sometimes finding evidence of past repairs can actually be a good thing. It means the problem has probably already been taken care of. The key is to make sure it was done by a reputable company and, this is the big one, to ask if it comes with a transferable lifetime warranty. That piece of paper is pure gold. So, here's your playbook. It's 3 simple steps. If you think there's a problem, first, hire a structural engineer to give you an official report. Second, get a quote for the repair. It's often in that $5,000 to $15,000 range. And third, you go back to the seller. You can ask them to fix it before you close, or you can just ask them to lower the price. So when you boil it all down, protecting yourself in your biggest investment really comes down to these 2 pillars. For the water, it is all about getting the right insurance. And for the soil, it is all about doing a thorough inspection. It really is that simple. You don't have to fear these risks, you just have to manage them. By understanding these hidden risks, you're not just a home shopper anymore. You're an educated investor. You can now walk through a property and spot things that 99% of other people are going to miss. And you can turn those potential problems into real negotiation leverage. You are now equipped to make a much, much smarter choice.